I hope you enjoyed learning about the early days of that first oil well from watching the prize and reading the prize. Just want to wrap up some of the things that helped me. You see the red circle on the map in Pennsylvania that shows this was in northwestern Pennsylvania, not very far from Lake Erie, and that's where a lot of rail lines were located, which helps you understand the process of moving the oil from the mountains of western Pennsylvania to the coast of Lake Erie and on the railroads into the refineries, which many of which began to be built like in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And that makes sense when you understand population centric area, but also ease of transportation. One of the other things I really like about these pictures is where you see the barrels. Why is oil measured by the barrel even to this day? Well, because they needed a way to put the oil into the wagons and transport it over to the rail lines, and so it was very easy to count how many barrels are there. And that's why they used whiskey barrels, which held 42 gallons of liquid, and that's still how we measure oil today. So it's interesting to me how many things were set up very early in the industry. And that's something we're going to talk about when we meet together again, because I think it's very important that you understand that this industry settled very quickly. What about the rest of the world? It wasn't only in America that they were drilling for oil. This is out of Azerbaijan, near the modern day city of Baku. Some date this to 1871, say it actually happened in 1876. What's interesting to me, as an aside, is that it was the Nobel family that was behind this drilling venture. So when we think of Nobel today, we think of the Peace Prize, and yet in reality, they were a dynamite business. As the industry matures, there are lots of booms and busts, and as you're going to see, that continues to this day. And into that breach stepped a man named Henry Rockefeller, along with his partner, and they formed Standard Oil. And part of what Henry Rockefeller wanted to do was establish some discipline in this because he saw all of the wastage that took place with the extreme booms and busts in the industry, which were already happening. His strategy was to build in the downstream industry, that is, the refineries. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense because oil itself doesn't have a market. It only has a market once it's refined into a final product. Therefore, arguably, the most important buyer in the food chain is the refinery. And so Henry Rockefeller tried to induce discipline by controlling the refining market, which then gave him the tentacles to go back into the midstream market, which is the transportation, and all the way back into the upstream market, which is where the buyers were. Even though you can criticize Rockefeller for a lot of what he did, his motives were actually somewhat pure in the beginning, which is he saw an industry that was ripe for more organization. And so they formed a modern day marvel called a joint stock company in 1870, and their core competency was really business. Rockefeller knew how to structure a business and how to design a business. Now, in some ways, he did it to hide the tentacles of his organization, but nonetheless, it was effective. In 1911, though, the Supreme Court ruled it was a monopoly and ordered it was broken up. Now, there were actually lots of other companies that were beginning to launch refineries at this same time. And in terms of the upstream activity, Standard Oil only owned about 11% of the upstream activity in 1911, but nonetheless, it was ordered to be broken up. Again, what's significant of this is if you look at the names of the companies that were created in that breakup, you recognize a lot of them because those are the major oil companies today. Let's turn our focus to Texas for just a minute. I'm not going to test you on these dates and places. I just think it's interesting. So oil was discovered in 1866 in Nacogdoches, Texas. 1895 Corsicana, which is also when they built the first refinery in Texas. The big one, though, was 1901 down on the Gulf Coast called Spindletop. First of all, it was a gusher, which you see from the video. And second, it was a part of a drilling improvement. Up until that time, the drilling had simply been they lift the drill bit up and they drop it like that. Spindletop is where they invented the process of rotary drilling, where they rotate the drill string instead of just dropping it to actually bore into the rock. Of course, today, that's the same basic approach that's done to drilling, which is that rotary drilling, so a major advance there. Close to Wichita Falls in 1907, in the town northeast of here by about 20 miles called Petrolia, they discovered natural gas. This is also when the first 1907 is also when the first service station opened. If you think about it, what was happening around 1900 to the illumination market? Well, we were going away from kerosene-powered lamps to this newfangled thing called electricity, commercialized by Thomas Edison with the light bulbs. And so the market for oil was taking a downturn because they didn't need so much in the illumination market. Luckily for the oil industry, there was a dramatic rise in the automobile industry, which, again, believe it or not, there was a contest whether cars were going to be electrically powered or powered by fossil fuel engines, and we know the fossil fuel engine won out, and that drove the new market for oil. In 1911, Electra, which is about 20 miles northwest of Wichita Falls, was also where they discovered oil. There are a lot of people in our area who are still drawing royalty checks from wells that were drilled many, many, many years ago. Now, I'm not saying 110 years ago, but that Electra oil field is still producing to this day and still generating revenue. Then in 1918, oil was discovered up in Burke-Burnett. This is a photo taken in the Burke-Burnett area, and if you're from this area and you know the nickname of Burke-Burnett is Boomtown Burke-Burnett, now you see why. This also is why Wichita Falls was kind of put on the map. For whatever reason, Burke-Burnett didn't develop as a city, but in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, Wichita Falls was where a lot of oil companies, a lot of major oil companies put their offices, and that really helped develop our town. 1920, Colorado City. The reason this is significant is this is the first discovery in the Permian Basin, which in the United States today is the most active onshore oil field. All of these things, again, are just to show you that oil was discovered all over Texas until we get to the Black Giant. The Black Giant is extremely important, and I want you to watch the video from the prize to get a sense of that.